Senator Sweeney, Senator Weinberg, thank you for agreeing to talk to New Jersey. Start off with Senator Sweeney. We're at the end of the legislative session. What are the one or two major accomplishments and one or two major disappointments that you look back on?
Well, something that was very controversial with people, which was benefit and pension reform, and it was only because of my concern for the workers not having a pension. The pension system was going bankrupt, and if we didn't do something quickly, it was going to. So I think that was probably the biggest issue for me in the last session. We've done a lot of bills. We focused on jobs in the economy, and unfortunately, because it was Democrat ideas on jobs in the economy, the governor vetoed the vast majority of the bills. And the governor continues to talk about how he's turned New Jersey around. Where our unemployment rate's higher than the national average, and we've given him multiple bills that he has continued to veto, and we got to put people back to work. So, I think that is, probably some of the last year. This year coming up, obviously marriage equality. We have Bill S1, which is critical for us to get done. It's a civil rights issue. It has nothing to do with religion. We want to straighten that issue out. Jobs in the economy, again, it's critical that we put people back to work. This economy is not turning around, and the governor cannot ignore this any longer. And whether it's Democrat or Republican, once he signs the bills, they're his. So it's not, he shouldn't be concerned about who's written the bills, as long as we start putting people back to work. And for me, shared services is another very big priority for me, because shared services is another way to continue to shrink government and provide services for the citizens of the state.
Okay. You mentioned the pension benefit reform. Obviously, that split the Democratic Party. Is there going to be a long-term impact on the Democrats because of this?
No, I think we're back together again. I think we're stronger than we've ever been. Listen, I have the greatest respect for my colleagues that disagreed with me. I'm one of two people in this caucus that actually make their livelihood from unions. My livelihood, with my house, what I pay my mortgage with, is from a union paycheck. So, I have a great deal of respect for my colleagues that disagreed with my position. It's just I come at it looking at it differently. I looked at the issue a little bit differently, but if anything, we went up stronger because the governor's actions in his budget, when he harmed people, when he cut aid for the visually impaired, when he cut women's health, when he cut we were trying to do a tax cut for seniors, and he cut that. When you look at the choices that the governor made, it was clear that although we had a difference in pension and health benefits, there was a difference. Our core beliefs are the same.
Should public sector workers have the right to collectively bargain?
Of course they should. Of course they should. But you have to understand, when you say you negotiate how much you pay into your pension and you're subject to market conditions, that's not even responsible to their members. To say I'm going to put 5.5% in when you might need 9%. The biggest problem with the pension, and people will say the government didn't pay their portion, they're 100% right. But the larger issue is that we have an assumption rate. That's what you assume the pension is going to make of 8.25% a year. Your pension has to make 8.25%. If everyone's paying what they're supposed to pay, the pension's fine. Well, over the last decade, we made 2%. So every year we were short 6.25% that someone had to make up. And no one wanted to acknowledge that. And the unions understood that as well as the management. Both sides knew we weren't managing the pensions properly. And we did some things in the pension and health care bill to give more ownership to the union leadership. So they sit at a table and make decisions together with management. What they do in my world, it's called Taft-Hartley. And it's labor management, and things work that way. They said we couldn't come up with new health plans. They said that was impossible. Labor and management together created 15 new health plans unanimously. So I absolutely believe in the right to collectively bargain. I negotiate contracts myself.
The Democrats will have a new majority leader in Senator Weinberg. What are the qualities that you see in her that helped you advocate for that position?
Remember, I'm sitting right here.
She's sitting right next to me. But honestly, she's what the Democrat Party stands for. And, my caucus saw in Senator Weinberg is that Senator Weinberg will be a voice for the caucus, for the entire caucus, and is the conscience of the party. People say that I'm a conservative Democrat. I'm probably somewhat more conservative than Senator Weinberg.
It's not
but
hard.
It's not hard to do. But honestly, Senator Weinberg's positions really do stand for what the Democrat Party stands for. So I was thrilled to have a majority leader. When I asked Senator Weinberg if she would do it, she was willing to do it. I was very fortunate to have someone with her credentials to stand and fight for the Democrat Party.
Senator Weinberg, the governor seems to be not very much of a supporter of medicinal marijuana. Where do we stand on that, and what can the legislature do to accelerate the availability of these palliative drugs?
Well, we certainly passed the law, and though the governor doesn't seem to be a strong supporter, really most of the problems now are coming from local municipalities, places that don't want these dispensaries in their local areas. So I think that along with many of the advocates, we have to do a better job of making people realize that this is a medical issue with a prescription to help alleviate people's pain. People don't have a problem with drugstores that give out morphine and things of that nature that are used in the same way that medical marijuana is. I think we have to help do a little better public relations job.
Moving on to education, Senator Sweeney, we're seeing changes to the traditional approach to public education that will drive tax money to for-profit entities. How do we ensure that these people put the needs of their kids ahead of the needs of their shareholders?
Well, obviously, the biggest concern is when you start talking about shifting away from traditional public education, is that they live up to the same standards as public education of our public schools. You're asking for public dollars, you should be held to the same standard. We actually did a very good job in education reform under Governor Corzine. He came up with a real funding formula that ended the distinction between Abbotts and non-Abbotts. We have a funding formula that works. This governor wants to talk about a new funding formula. Absolutely not. Fund the formula that we have. It's fair. The money follows the child. But when you talk about moving away from the public schools, they have to be held to the same standard. If we want to take tax dollars away from public entities, well, they should operate in a different fashion.
So when you say they should be held to the same standards, does that include things like teacher qualification and bidding for contracts?
Absolutely.
Should taxpayers have a say in whether or not charter schools are put in their districts?
At first I wasn't there, but I am now because of where they're being popped up at. And in certain areas you're actually harming public education. There's areas where charter schools are needed, where competition is needed. There are good charter schools, there's bad charter schools. Charter schools are not the end-all be-all for everyone. There's a waiting list in Camden right now of 2,500 children to go into a charter school. Well, there's space in the charter schools in Camden, but people want to go to a specific charter school because they view that one as successful where others are not. So, no one should be fooled that charter schools are the answer to everything, because they're not.
If I can add to that, I think what we really need is a look at the charter school law. It's about 10 years old now, and I think we need to see where it needs updating, whether or not we should see a really good study of charter schools that are successful, charter schools that aren't, what's good about them, what's been incorporated into the rest of the public school curriculum, which was the reason for establishing them. So I think we really have to begin at looking at the overhaul, and had some firsthand experience with that crazy virtual charter school application where the Department of Education told the Board of Education in the town in which I live and work, Teaneck, that they should set aside $15 million from their budget. It was so patently bizarre that it helped, I think, expose some of the shortcomings of the current charter school law.
Senator Weinberg, the Opportunity Scholarship Act essentially moves taxpayer money to religious institutions. Does this breach the wall of separation of church and state?
As far as I'm concerned, I am not supportive of the Opportunity Scholarship Act. I think it became much too wide in its application. Too many communities were included into the last revision of the bill that I saw. And I certainly do not believe we should be giving public money to children who are already in private religious schools. They are already out of the public school system. There's a lot that's needed to change in that law. And generally, I do not believe that public money should go to pay tuition to religious schools over and above what we're already paying as taxpayers in textbook aid, transportation aid, nursing services, those kinds of things.
Senator Sweeney, on the Opportunity Scholarship Act, do you essentially agree?
I'm not a fan of sending money, public money, to private schools. As far as the bill itself, I couldn't tell you what it does because I don't know what it looks like. There's been 20 different versions. They've expanded it, they've contracted it. I'll look at the bill, but I personally am not a fan of taking public money into private schools.
As a result of the cap on superintendent salaries, we're seeing many leaving or retiring, yet the cap does not apply to charter schools, which are also funded by taxpayers. Why the difference?
Well, it's something that we have to address. To be perfectly honest with you, there shouldn't be a difference. You know, it's easy to point and make arguments, well, that superintendent's making too much money or this one's making too much money. A lot of times you get what you pay for. And you have people that are running governments of hundreds of millions of dollars. And you want a qualified person running that program. So there shouldn't be a difference between the privates and the publics, especially when they're both getting tax dollars.
Let's move on to marriage equality, which we briefly touched on before. Governor Christie says that his personal beliefs are against marriage equality, and it's likely that he will veto any bill that's passed. If so, are there enough Republicans who are independently minded enough to help override a veto?
Well, first, I think the governor has to look at this bill again, because it's not about your personal beliefs. There's no religious issue here. The exemptions in this bill are actually a little bit larger than the ones that was just done in New York. So what could possibly be personal about civil rights and treating people equally? I would urge the governor to actually look at the bill first and really think deep down, why would you oppose two people that want to have the same rights as I have? It's civil rights, and I can't imagine the governor would oppose a civil rights bill. Honestly, if it was religion, I could see it, because I'm a Catholic also, and you know the pressures from your church and from your different religions, you know, the different religions that are out there, there's a lot of pressures at some point, but it's not in this bill. This is not a religious issue, and we can't let it get caught up in that. There are going to be people that are going to try to force this to be about the Catholic Church, about certain religions, Jewish, the Black
More
Acts.
traditional Jewish observances are also very vociferous against marriage equality, and that's their right. Nothing in this bill will require them to change their practices, their beliefs, or their ideals.
And why would someone, seriously now, let's put the shoe on the other foot, just because I choose to marry a certain way, why should another group be able to have, control, flip it around? It's not right. And that's why I don't think, if the governor really looks at this bill and examines it, he shouldn't have any issues. And yes, I think we will work, and I think that we have colleagues on the Republican side that are going to recognize that this is strictly one thing, a civil rights issue. It's not religion, it's nothing more, nothing less. And last time around, I think people got mired in and caught up in this belief that, the end of the world was going to happen because people were going to get married. God bless them if they want to get married. God bless people if they want to be married. I wish them nothing but the best.
And as I point out, that marriage equality exists in Iowa. They actually got through all of those Iowa caucuses in spite of the fact that two gay people can get married in the state of Iowa.
Moving on to jobs, Senator Weinberg, we're starting to see the national job situation improve. Unemployment is starting to creep down, but New Jersey's unemployment rate is still above the national average. The Republican mantra of tax cuts create jobs has been shown really not to work. What specifically can the next legislative session do to create jobs?
Well, I think our Senate President Sweeney touched on this a little earlier. We passed a whole series of job creation bills. The governor, who spends a lot of time criticizing President Obama, the governor vetoed all of these bills. Maybe we should ask the governor, instead of criticizing the president, maybe you should look at some of our president's job creation ideas and help us do that in the state of New Jersey. We passed a whole series of those bills.
And I have to add, they were bipartisan. I mean, we went out of our way to make sure they were bipartisan. There were Republican primes. It wasn't about Republican-Democrat. It was about putting people back to work. And when the governor says we can't afford to do these things, well, he finds a way to make things priorities when they're important to him. Well, what's important to myself and Senator Weinberg is putting people back to work. And you can brag about all the job creation that you have in this state. We are far behind the national average, and we need to catch up. So we need to go back in a bipartisan fashion and address the jobs issues in the state. We have some great plans. There's the Speaker's Georgia Works Plan, Jersey Works Plan, where people on unemployment actually get to go to work in places and gain job experience. The employers get to have an employee that they don't have to pay for, but they train. 11,000 people in the first year wound up with jobs. You know, that's a success story, just by letting somebody go to work.
You know, we haven't had the millionaire's tax that we talked about for the last 2 years. What happened to our unemployment rate during that period of time? As proof is what exists.
The job creators seem to be hoarding the dollars.
They forgot about creating the job aspect.
Senator Sweeney, the governor's energy master plan reduces the goal for renewable energy by 25%. And although New Jersey is the leader in solar energy production, the price of solar renewable energy certificates has gone down. They're at an all-time low. What can the next session do to reduce our dependence on dirty energy?
Well, we're working right now to fix the solar problem. You know, we were proud of what we accomplished in New Jersey, honestly, under a Democrat governor. We came up with a very good energy plan that speeded up the solar program. The problem is we kind of flooded the market, which devalued the credits. So what we're actually we're working on legislation right now with Senator Smith and Assemblyman Shivakula and Senator Norcross that kind of forces a pressure up, but so the prices don't get crazy, have a pressure down. And we want to speed up the portfolio. Right now we do about 30 megawatts a month, and that's something we should continue to try to strive for. But if we don't fix that, you know, we're going to see a solar market continue to decline. So we are working as we speak on a fix to that, because we want New Jersey to be a leader in solar, wind, and clean energy, because we can be. It's just a matter of moving forward and getting it right. We were close. But unfortunately, the success we were so successful, it harmed us.
Last question. We've seen in the recent election a few incidences where residency has been questioned with Gabby Mosquera, with Carl Lewis. Do we need to clarify our residency laws?
Well, I think we absolutely have to. And the thing with the Assemblywoman-elect from the 4th District, Gabby, that is a ridiculous decision. 10 years ago that was heard. This young lady, this is during redistricting too. This is the year we did redistricting. So anyone that wanted to move into a district to run was allowed to run. So the fact that they hung up on this issue is, honestly, that is disgraceful. And, you know, I don't like meddling in the courts, because I like the fact that we have independent courts, but we absolutely have to bring clarity to this issue, because when you do things like that and you deny 19,900 and some voters the right She won in a landslide. For a judge to overrule this, and her opponent actually said that this is something they were looking at, that they were going to challenge, hoping that this would seat her. You know what I mean? So this is really not right for a judge to interpret something that has been looked at and overruled 10 years ago. He's making law again.
Okay. Senator Sweeney, Senator Weinberg, thank you. We look forward to the next session.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.